Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Season 2, Episode 2, The Passenger. What in God's name? I just... This episode confused the crap out of me. Because on the one hand, it's terrible, but on the other hand, it's fantastic. I feel like I've been saying that a lot lately about The Mandalorian. This is such a confusing show. Like, this is kind of exactly what I want out of The Mandalorian. Legitimately. I want this to be these two doing their little side jobs and side quests as they kind of just... And the focus is on their dynamic and how the world rotates around them, right? On the other hand, this episode makes absolutely no sense on basically every level. Oh yeah, and then there's also the icky and the gross. But I'm going to skip over that for just a second. So, first we start off with Mando being ambushed by some randos. Okay. They never even explain, like, anything about that. These randos ambush Mando, and we're not even sure if they're specifically trying to ambush him, or just the next person who comes through that particular chunk of canyon. Now, I don't actually have a problem with them lying out the trap on that canyon. Weirdly enough, anybody who knows anything about desert traveling knows that desert travel, if you don't have tech, is all about landmarks, right? And so if you're going from here to here, you want to go through like that canyon line because that's a landmark that tells you where you're going and keeps you on track, right? You know what I'm talking about if you know anything about this kind of stuff. So, okay, them laying a trap there makes perfect sense. Catches him, okay, yeah, that's nobody's going to be able to deal with that. They did mention the kid, I saw that. But then they also were like totally willing to let go of the kid for the... I don't know, this is weird, this whole sequence. And it feels like they're just like, alright, come on. If I was playing a video game, this would be the you just lost the airship scene, right? I mean, he literally just lost the speeder bike. So then he decides to walk back to town. That sounds like fun. Okay. I do like how he kills the guy with the jetpack. Yeah, sure, keep the jetpack. And goodbye. There's this wonderful bit where he's back in the canteen and he's talking to Pelly. And he says, yeah, I had to go kill a crate dragon. She says, oh, is that all? You could tell by the way she says that she doesn't believe him at all. Like, there's no part of her actually buys that he just killed a crate dragon. I almost wish we could have seen her face as he brings in the crate meat later. It's just... Like, just... You don't have to call attention to it. Just have her be like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then she just reacts physically as she sees the meat. Like, wait, really? Would you... Where did you... How did you... Okay, okay. Roasted crate... I wonder what crate tastes like. It's got to be extremely muscular for a creature that size, right? And there's Ant-Man. It's there for some reason. I wonder how they flavor that. I wonder, like, does it taste like bantha? Is it proteiny? Like is it alligatory? I don't know. I'm actually really curious about this. Probably more so than I should be. She even specifically mentions that she wants it medium well, right? She's not a Rhodian after all. What does Sarlacc taste like? Despair. Oh, it definitely looked like a red meat thing, yeah. I don't know. I've always had this mental thing that dragons taste spiced, right? Like literally like if you could just picture... I don't know how to put it into words. I could taste it in my head, if that makes any sense. So it makes me wonder exactly like if a crate would taste the same way. I'm getting way too much down on this stupid thing. So then we have this wonderful bit where it's like, all right, listen, his tail will grow back, right, Ross? Yeah, I do like so then we find out that he's going to be taking that like the price for this is he has to take this person over there. Okay. That's Sublight. Now, my first knee-jerk reaction was literally, what? Like, I actually physically said that out loud when I was watching the episode. And then I was like, well, hold on. Maybe it's just like someplace within the system, right? Maybe they're misusing the nature of the word sector, because they specifically say sector. So if it's within the same system, that's merely a few days or weeks or months, depending on how far out of the system it is. So, okay, that's terrible. But, okay, I'm going to let that go. And we need to get there by equinox. So you're in a hurry. You can't go at hyper... Okay. Why does hyperspace... Like, I know... Oh, God. Oh, God. And then there... So, okay, whatever. So I'm just going to walk over that. Because it's such an unnecessary thing. Yeah, that was the theme of the spider cave right there. So then Baby Yoda decides to kind of eyeball the eggs, which I actually wrote in my notes. Why is Baby Yoda eyeballing the eggs? There's this wonderful little bit where Polly says, I'm an excellent judge of character. And he's like, what? But actually, if you think about it, so far she has been pretty legit about that. I mean, she nailed Mando the first time she saw him. There's some really, really, really good usage of the Baby Yoda puppet in this episode. In fact, one thing I noticed is they're a little bit more willing to show him doing his own animations in a vacuum. As in, nobody's holding him and he's animated. He's actually moving essentially on his own. You know, moving across the ship, or moving in the snow, or moving in the cave, or whatever. You could tell that they're feeling a little bit more brave about using the Baby Yoda puppet. Probably because they have built a couple of extra spares by this point, but far more importantly because they understand exactly how well the Baby Yoda merch sold. This is a true anecdote. A friend of mine's aunt had never seen Star Wars before. This just wasn't part of her life's, her sphere of influence. Watched The Mandalorian, and that day went out and bought some Baby Yoda stuff. And I only say that to try and emphasize how even people who have nothing to do with Star Wars were running out and buying Baby Yoda merch. I know that's just one anecdote, but come on. I do not have a plushie of Baby Yoda, no. I mean, first of all, he's not a shark, he's not a Pokemon, so I've got no use for him. I hate to keep complaining about the tech. I know nobody likes it when I complain about the tech. So instead, I'm going to explain why I complain about the tech. Because they show a quick shot where they actually show his course. Now, they do something smart here. They show that he's specifically hitting systems and warping around them like this, probably using the gravity of those systems to speed him up a little bit, and also because that's actually kind of how space travel would work. Space travel is very rarely a straight line, right? But it's still multiple systems. Someone do me a favor and tell me how long it would take us to get to Alpha Centauri, which is right next door from an interstellar perspective. The problem here is and always will be that space is big. And an overwhelming number of people just have absolutely no idea how big space is. This is the... Hey, cute Tomb Raider. At 17,000 miles an hour, it'll take us 148,000 years. I've noticed this trend a lot in recent fiction, and I have to admit, I will continue and always will push back against this. But there's been this trend, probably since about like 2007 or so, especially in science fiction, to pretend that space is really, really small. No. Like even smaller than you're thinking. If I can use one example right off the top of my head. In Star Trek Into Darkness, which is the second of the Kelvin timeline movies, there's a tidbit where they warp to Kronos, which is the Klingon homeworld, which is ludicrously far away. Like, it's the kind of thing that even by Star Trek standards should be a multi-year journey at warp to reach. They get there like in an afternoon. They get there, they talk, they leave to head back to Earth. They get pulled out of warp around Jupiter. Okay? Now, Do you know how far away... Someone do me a favor, real quick. Please Google. How far away is Jupiter from Earth right now? You know, there's a reason we use astronomical as an adjective to describe something incredibly huge. $510 million miles away. And yeah, no, I know Empire does this too. When I eventually review Empire, I will give a negative for the fact that the Falcon goes from Hoth to Bespin at sublight. So, in that same movie, something knocks out the power in the Enterprise and it starts falling towards Earth. Please think about that for 5 seconds. It's in orbit of Jupiter. And it starts falling towards Earth. And then it gets there in a few minutes and crashes on Earth. This is a very common thing. I've seen this a lot. Yeah, Mass Effect 3 kind of does this too. There are several, like I said, it's an increasing trend I've noticed in science fiction to just kind of look at space and go, and just really shrink everything down. Yeah, Battlestar Galactica did the same thing too. That's actually a good point. You know, like, it's weird. It's weird the way this is a thing. And I'm sorry for talking about this. I said I wouldn't. I apologize. But I wanted to talk about the scale thing. I myself have run into this exact same problem when it comes to scale, because space is huge. And space is so huge that by itself it creates a problem. I think Rax mentioned this earlier. One of the good things about Firefly was that the verse is one system. And even then, it takes a minute to get from point A to point B, as it should. I also want to mention, yeah, this is exactly why hyperspace exists. It's why, back in the EU, and I know people don't want me to bring this up here, but the EU was a lot more consistent and well-designed about how hyperspace works. And in the AU, a lot of the rules of hyperspace have been completely flung out the window. I'm not even going to bring up the Holdo maneuver. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. All I'm going to say is hyperspace skipping from episode 9. Like, the AU has just thrown hyperspace rules out the window completely. It just does whatever the hell they need it to do for the particular work in question. And this has been a semi-common trend. Again, not just in Star Wars, but in science fiction in general. Yeah, it's just a fast travel thing. Yeah, space is just the loading screen. Oh my god, it's Starfield! It's freaking Starfield! So... this is exactly why I tend to come down on these kinds of things. Because, yeah, the Caprulu sector is actually an absolutely minuscule spot. They still need FTL to bounce around in the Caprulu sector. But it's this absolute pinprick in one area, in one quadrant, in one part of the galaxy. Ow. Actually, I have played GoldenEye 64. I don't own it, though. It was a friend's copy, and I never bought my own. I think I have it on the Switch, technically, because of the N64 Online thing. The Star Wars galaxy is huge, but hyperspace kind of circumvents that. Or at least it did, back in the day. And so just, you know, flunk. Like, I forget the exact numbers. I used to know this by heart, but it took something like a year to cross known space in Star Wars, which is like, it's not actually all the way across the galaxy because of how the map works, but it's like from here to here on the galaxy map, right? So like maybe about a third of the way across the galaxy's overall width. And that's, you know, a hell of a trip, but the point is, that's also very well designed, all things considered. Because you think, oh, a year to cross that distance is huge. What you really need to be thinking is, oh my god, that's insanely fast! Hyperspace has always been ludicrously fast. That's actually one of the key points of Star Wars, is that the galaxy is relatively smaller. In Star Trek, like if you looked at the galaxy map, Star Trek occurs like right here. All of Trek occurs like right here in this little dot. That's explored space in Star Trek. Because of course it is. It has to be, because warp drive, relatively speaking, is so much slower than hyperspace. Let's not even get into the whale thing. Hyperspace lanes are... So there's no such thing as an actual... getting into world building. There's no such thing as like a lane of energy or whatever in hyperspace. A hyperspace lane is just a path that naturally doesn't have a lot of obstacles on the way, right? That's also why hyperspace lanes tend to rotate and move over time. That's why calculations are needed every single time you do a jump. That's why you constantly need to be upgrading your nav data. That's why astromech droids are so useful for something like an X-Wing. You need a completely separate computer somewhere that has that data and can calculate your course, because space moves. Things move in space. And all of this builds and dives into the world building, which is my overall point. We had this discussion when I was playing Link Between Worlds semi-recently. I love good world building in fiction. I eat it up. Because what it does is it puts me more into the fiction in question. It makes me feel it more. It makes me believe it more. And I'm willing to let go of a lot more things. My suspension of disbelief is stronger because of the fact that you did the work to try and make it so I can believe what's happening on your screen is believable. Does that make sense? Yeah, exactly. 30,000 times this week. Yeah, I know exactly. Speaking of Zelda, and obviously we don't want to go full nitty-gritty, no really style. I myself, I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was something that I was discussing how something worked. I think it was actually the Force when we were first doing the setup for our wars, for our Star Wars. And I was talking about how I wanted to define the Force, and I did. And then someone's like, well, but you didn't fully define it. Because they thought I meant no really defining it, going much, 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 much further down the rabbit hole than I actually did. Which, no, of course not, because you gotta have a reasonability. Like, you don't want to go fully in-depth into everything. But faster than light travel is kind of a fundamental groundwork of a lot of science fiction, including Star Wars, right? You need to do something to define how FTL works, how it operates, and what the rules are of it. That way we can understand how it works. That way we can understand why it works. That way when something goes wrong, we can know that something went wrong. Like, if you don't define a thing to the first place, we don't understand what right or wrong even are, because they're not on display. I'm sorry to go so far down to the rabbit hole of this, but this whole episode hinges on the fact that he can't just hyperjump to his location. Again, I wouldn't be making this big of a deal of it, except for the fact that the whole plot hinges on the fact that he has to sublight, which means slower than light speed, which means slow as crap. And again, this is, even if this was in system, this would be a huge ass journey, right? So that's why this bothers me so much, because they drew so much attention to it, and it's very clear they didn't think about it at all. I'm not even going to get into the fact that, you know, hyperspace disrupts the eggs. You know what? I'm willing to buy that. My suspension of disbelief is sufficient that it's like, hey, we need to go past, it screws with the egg somehow. Okay, it's another dimension. It makes perfect sense to me that you just say, her specific species is affected by this. Okay. That would also explain why we haven't seen these people before, because they're probably system locked here. Because they can't leave the system, because they don't have the years necessary to do so. Okay, I'm with that. And yeah, if they just made this whole episode within system, all these problems immediately go away. I've noticed this trend, and I don't know if that's true here, that a lot of writers have this problem with zooming in the camera too far. Or I guess not too far, but like zooming in the camera to the extent that they probably should, might be a better way to put that. Like, it's not Star Wars if it's not traversing galaxies and going across sectors. And no, it'll be fine, I swear. That could be Bionic Punk. That's another thing. Like, maybe her species can travel in hyperspace, but in this very specific thing, it's fine. I don't know. I apologize for going so far down the rabbit hole in this one thing, but it bugged the crap out of me. And I couldn't stop thinking about it the entire episode. And yeah, exactly. It's because plot. The reason why they can't go in hyperspace is so they can go down to the planet and crash. I've seen that complaint too, Rex. You remember what my mother said about Andor? Can I share that real quick? For those of you who didn't watch my Andor streaminations, little anecdote here. My mother texts me daily, and I text her back. It's back and forth communication thing. And I was telling her the show I was covering, which at the time was Andor. And she was like, "Oh, what's that?" I said, "Well, it's a Star Wars show that ... And I gave a fairly thorough summary, not examination, of what the show was about. And, okay, I'm with that. She responded, "Wow, that sounds really boring." Later on, she actually added to that, asking, where's the Jedi and where's the lightsabers? That's not quite the anecdote. Because later on, after finishing the show, I reached out to my sister and my niece. I remind you, my niece is getting too old, but she's 11, right? So, and I gave her the exact same description I gave my mother. And both of them were totally into it. And I've rarely have been so proud of my niece as the fact that this boring Star Wars show sounded great to her. Because you're right, this is the problem. Some people insist on having this kind of crap, and I push against this constantly. I cannot tell you how many times I'll have people yell at me, metaphorically, nobody actually yells at me, on the comment section or on the stream when we're reviewing a game, and I'm pointing at something where it's like, all right, the scale is big and bold, and the entire world is being destroyed unless we do this thing. And I'm just like, I'm completely de-invested, because they didn't do it right. They didn't put the work and effort necessary for me to give a crap about the world-ending threat. Don't mistake me. I like a good world-ending threat. When you do it right, which they usually don't. Usually it's just scale equals good. Scale equals investment, right? I was more invested in Andor. And I know I'm losing the low-hanging fruit here. But I was more invested in Andor and its individual deals and their tiny little lives than I have been so far in Mandalorian. Than I was in Rise of Skywalker, which was the entire galaxy, by the way. An entire fleet of planet-destroying ships. An entire fleet of planet-destroying ships. But Andor had me more. I cared more. Yeah, I was more invested in freaking Cyril's cereal. That's not even a joke. If you remember, we paused for like 10 minutes to discuss the significance of the fact that he had cereal. Because they were using food as world building. Like they should. I'm sorry. I'm getting loud. I apologize. Because Hazardous is absolutely right. My mother is the typical general audience. And that's something I've been talking about for 25 years now. God, closer to 30 now. Is that quality can and occasionally does get success. That does happen. But it's always luck, right? What the general audience, what the popular audience want is almost always something bigger and flashier, and I'm just going to say this as bluntly as I possibly can, dumber. I'm sorry for sounding so irritated. I've been pushing against this for half my life. Anyways. Really going down the deep end on that one. I mean, honestly, you've noticed. I think it was Trihexia just mentioned. These have been short. Like the Arcane episode that just went live, episode 2. It's like an hour and 12 minutes of us discussing Arcane episode 2. And you know the worst part is I don't really blame the people who don't want to think when they watch their fiction. I don't. There's no shaming there. The argument I've always used, and it's so easy to understand, is I want you to picture that you've just got off work, and it's been a hard, long day at work. and you're frustrated and tired, and then you have to drive home. So you're driving home, you're getting back there, and you just can't wait to get home, and you get home, it's like, oh, and now you have to deal with dinner. Okay, you put together dinner, you feed whoever you happen to be there, and yet you just want to relax, right? You just want to sit back and watch some blasters and some X-Wings and some lightsabers. I understand that. I really do. Like, that's why there's no shame here. Really. Not every day is a bad day. And sometimes you really want to actually engage yourself in a work. And this is entering the realm of speculative. But I do also think that it's possible to have turn off your brain stuff and intelligent stuff in the same work. I don't know that 100%. I don't have proof of that, but I'd like to think it's possible to have something that can be popularly appealing while still having the depth for, for the rest of the time, right? For when you do have time to dig into it, for when you're rewatching it and you catch things you didn't catch before, for when you really just have time to actually sit and chew on a particular work and be like, oh, I didn't catch that, or oh, that's so cool, right? The really good stuff, the depth, the layers that are there can be there in something that's still pop, right? Anyways. Sorry for going way down the rabbit hole on something effectively unrelated to the episode. But yeah, now I got to talk about the episode. And the really funny part is I'm just going to race through the rest of this. Really. Because there's actually very, very little else to talk about. So they decide to go ahead and do the route. Okay. 2 X-Wings show up. Can I just say, I liked these guys. I liked them. Legitimately. The 2 pilots show up. Yes, I know one of them is Filoni. I don't need a thing in this sector. That was before. This sector is under New Republic jurisdiction. All ships are required to run a beacon. And his response is, well, thank you for letting me know. And their response is, cool, but we're going to need a ping from you. So he decides to run. Notice they didn't shoot him on sight, didn't harass him, and didn't, in fact, they hesitated quite a while, even though they had plenty of shots where they could have gone after him. And even when they had a run on him, they actually kept the comms open and said, please don't make us do this. Honestly, I liked everything about that. Because what we're seeing is cops who are doing their freaking jobs, rather than cops being pigs. Right? I don't want to give them too much credit, but still, I was actually kind of like, okay, yeah, this is kind of nice to see. It's what you'd expect from the Rebels. And instead, yeah, compare these 2 guys from the Rent-A-Cops in Andor. That's a great comparison. Compare these 2 cops to the guy, do you remember the stormtrooper when Grief was bringing in, names, Mando and Cara. And the one particular trooper was like, I'll give you 20 credits for the helmet. Or, to go back to Andor, I hate to keep coming back to Andor. Do you remember how the Imperial Patrol Craft just decided to board a ship that they had absolutely no reason whatsoever to board for practice? You remember that? These are just soldiers doing a patrol. Okay. So, this whole conversation was apparently in spitting distance, basically in upper atmosphere of a planet. What? It's right there. Apparently, that's sure convenient. I'm not even going to question that. The geography is so bonkers. Let's just move on. So, big action sequence. He gets away. I play with, I watch with subtitles on to make sure I don't miss anything. And one of the things that I liked about it was every time the woman was talking, it said she was speaking frog. Now, I know he actually said that later on, but it just amused me that the official subtitles say, in frog, blah, 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 blah. They also do something very clever. It's a trick I'm going to remember for the future. One of the interesting tricks about being a creator is every now and again you want to kill off a character, but you don't want to get rid of the actor. And there's a bunch of ways you can do that. You can do flashbacks, you can do memories or dream sequences, hallucinations. You can do all kinds of fun stuff to keep having an actor on your show, even if the character has left your show. There's a very, very minor tidbit where the actor of the droid of Zero actually gets more lines in this because she's using him as a translator. That's clever. That's clever. I liked that. I just wanted to comment on that very briefly because that impressed me. Like I said, I'm going to remember that. I'm going to remember that trick. So we see Baby Yoda. He eats the spider and the egg. I had to look away for several seconds because that was way too much for me. I didn't at all Warcraft code, but thank you for asking. Yeah, Baby Yoda. What the hell was going on with Baby Yoda here? And now we have the giant. Aren't these from Dagobah? Real talk, like that's not me, right? These spider monsters look like something from I swear I saw in Dagobah. No word yet, Warcraft code. We'll see. Yeah, what did Yoda do with this crap? Oh no. Yeah, it was in concept art. That's right. And they were in Rebels. You're right. Yeah. Anyways, so then there's this. So they're storming in, and everything's terrifying. And then they get into the ship, which is the first moment at which I start freaking out a little bit. Can I share a quick story here, real quick? As he navigates the web-covered ship to go outside to figure out who his saviors are, the cavalry, I was reminded of a job I had once. Some of you know that the third longest job I've ever held was a janitor. And one time I had to go out, there was a house a lady was trying to sell, and she wanted it all cleaned up. Yes, I actually am, Brax, which is kind of what I'm leading to. So I just went to this house, and it was actually pretty clean, except for the colossal amount of spiders and spider webs all over the place. I have never forgotten that job, or how much I hated every second of it. That was... It's actually the specific spot where I learned... Oh, no, I did it. Of course I did the job. But it was the specific spot where I learned about how you could use water to remove spiders temporarily from an area. I actually got out a freaking hose and started hosing down some of the more dense areas. And it was a whole thing. You get a little, like, a bit of soap up there, kind of push it. Like you get a sponge. Soak the sponge in tons and tons of soap. Put it in there, like that, right? Works really well. I'm never doing that again. I've also been underneath a house before. You ever do that? I don't recommend it. I did like how Frog Lady's survival instinct kicked in and she started actually hopping. That was actually a nice touch. But anyways. Yeah, so anyways, I have to point out one thing. I know I keep pointing out all these little flaws in the episode's logic, but yeah, his ship is completely wrecked. And, okay, but one of the things that's wrecked is specifically the largest of the spiders slams its claw down through the cockpit twice, shattering through the glass. Point number one. That's not glass, that's transparisteel, which is called that for a frickin' reason. The odds of this thing being able to slam through that are so insignificant that I'm actually having trouble even calculating it properly. Second problem. Now that those holes are there, how the hell do you patch that? You'll notice that when we see Mando doing the job of cleaning everything up and repairing the cockpit, he doesn't do anything with the actual glass, because of course he doesn't. There's no possible way that they could actually showcase how we would fix that, right? Fun fact, I actually thought about how I would fix it. It's actually really simple because I've played a video game that actually has a very, very similar concept. What you do is you get essentially a... Oh God, I don't know what to call it. Like essentially a Band-Aid made out of metal. Chunk, plate that on there, bolt it in. Right? Like this. And it's a very, very, very temporary thing, which actually lowers the structural integrity of the whole glass. But it will patch the hole temporarily. That gets you to port. And as Rax says, you got to replace the whole glass eventually. But you have functionally duct taped the hole. And I was actually kind of waiting for him to do that. Nope. They just kind of walk away from the fact that that happens. And then, you know, he's going to have to limp his way out. I do like that they specifically mention that he seals himself in the cockpit because it's the only place he can maintain Atmo anymore. That's actually a nice touch. And I do like the fact that his ship is absolutely limping. But you know what I like best of all? The X-Wing pilots who were professional enough and cared about doing their job enough to seek this guy out, help him out, and inform him that they were going to go ahead and let him go, despite the fact that he did the jailbreak back in Season 1. I am weirdly okay with this whole sequence of affairs. It's nice to see the New Republic be the cavalry, first and foremost. In fact, I'm sure some of you noticed that that sounded a lot like X-Wing blaster fire when the first few shots came in. But second of all, it's just nice to have them be there and helping and doing their freaking job. They don't do their job as much as I would have liked, of course, but that still tracks. These are still, after all, just two soldiers doing a patrol. They probably got to get back at this point. So we're going to let you, we're going to let you go. Yeah, they patrol the Outer Rim. They know how this works. They also did their due diligence. Did you catch that? It would be very easy for anybody, cop or soldier, to look at the situation and say, oh my god, your ship was docked at this other ship when a breakout happened and a murder happened. You're under arrest. But instead they actually checked the records and checked the logs and checked the flight recorder and said, oh, okay, so you aren't really the person we need to go after here. Okay. I'm kind of with that. And then the episode ends with the ship just kind of limping horribly away. God, poor ship. So what are we thinking? Yeah, they could have killed him and taken the baby. They could have brought him in general. They could have done all kinds of stuff. They didn't. I'm with that. I love chat. Green, yellow, orange. I'm actually a little torn on this one. This is... I'm kind of vibing green here, honestly. I'm kind of vibing green. It's an extremely forgettable episode, which fumbles at its overall core, and it feels like the kind of thing I wanted, but doesn't actually succeed at it. It does have several saving graces, and I do think it's absolutely not as bad as Blue. But yeah, the whole thing and the whole plot escalates on something that just shouldn't even be there. And there's so little here. There's so little meat on the bone, right? To go back to what Dakota said earlier. This is probably one of the only episodes. In fact, I stand by that, because the Gunslinger was just kind of, and this just feels kind of like, you know? Every other episode I've enjoyed to some extent or another. This is the first one that, well, excuse me, the second one that made me go, yeah, a few more polishing passes on this, and I can see this working. I do find it funny, and I have to find it funny, that if he had just gone along with the pilots, they would have been like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. And that would have been the end of that. I get it, not that he knows that, and he has no reason to trust the New Republic, but it is amusing to think about. Wow, that's loud. So yeah, next episode, which we are covering today, is Season 2, Episode 3, The Heiress. Which we'll be covering. Hang on, let me look about how long it is. Let me give you a little bit of an ETA here. I have already... Yeah, this is assuredly something for the Rangers, right? Looks like Heiress is relatively short. Yeah, less than 30 minutes. Like 28 minutes. So we'll go ahead and be bouncing through that pretty quickly. No break this time. So, yes, we are, Ross. So I will go ahead and just jump right into it in just a moment.